priority now, and therefore they are trying to see the business strategies the management is adopting, and what are the because it's also an investor requirement. Investors are also more want to invest in companies which are more responsible enough in taking care of all these regulatory aspects, plus also the sustainability aspects. So ESG is not only regulatory, it's also sustenance of business. So here what it covers is, it covers the customers are also looking at companies which are sustainable, which the brand value increase once you have all these practices in place. So the customers are looking forward for that. The employees are also wanting to work in such companies which are having good practices. And if you see the supply chain, the vendor management, so there also we need to work with vendors who are more compliant in ESG and circular economy practices. So your business itself will get improved, or your you will be more competitive if you are adopting all these principles and practices, as LAN also rightly mentioned, how the investors are looking at it. And therefore, it is no longer good to have kind of a situation. It is must to have. It is going in a direction of must to have these principles adopted in your practices, in your operations. And therefore, the MSMEs have to kind of look at it in that way and see how you are building up your cost structure, your pricing models, your business models in such a way that you are participating in this value chain, and then you're growing your company forward. And you are the, as CMAs, I think you are the good partners for this, because from the finance side, you will be working very closely with the plant engineers, the plant managers, management, and all that. And therefore, you will be able to address it, working very closely with them, address it, and then see how you can help in taking your company forward, adopting these practices, and also reducing your cost and becoming more profitable and also competitive in this environment.
Thank you. So it's quite clear from whatever we have heard that there is an imperative for MSMEs to go in for greener technologies, to go in for the circular economy models, because they are part of a long value chain where unless the whole value chain is aligned, there would be a mismatch, and any weak link will expose the entire value chain to non-circularity. There is also the imperative of perception and the expectations of investors to have planet friendly processes. The two questions that arise are funding. The obviously, to transition from one type of technology or one source of raw materials to another, or one model of linear economy to circular economy, there is need for capital. There is also need for sustained working, because the payback may not be as attractive as one would expect in a throwaway kind of an economy. And there is need for technology, technological inputs. And all of these have traditionally been weaknesses of MSMEs, because they don't have access to capital or access to technology to the extent large scale companies have. So, in this particular background, what do you think the role of CMAs would be? What would be the role of the large scale industry, and how can we incentivize MSMEs to go in for the circular model? Maybe I can start.
Yeah, maybe I'll start and then Vidya can add on. Yeah. I think the first role that a CMA can do is to look at what the investment that's needed for for making the organization CA compliant, and segregate that into those investments that will produce an economic return, because they will further business directly, because those can be funded from regular commercial sources of capital. And then segregate and identify those investments which may not produce an immediate economic return, because many industries will not have that return. And for those, look either for a investment in the form of grants that come either from green bodies, locally, nationally, internationally, or look for impact investors who are willing to sort of put in money and expect a lower return in return for a better organization that is more sustainable in the long run. So that's the first role that the CMA can do. And second is to monitor the effective execution of this. The challenge with the second source of capital is that it's very often, because there is the guardrails are not very strong, it is squandered. And that's why it has historically it has failed. If the CMA can ensure that the investments are done effectively, projects are implemented effectively, and then we go on that path, I think that can really help, that can help the organization make this transition much faster. On the larger role of larger companies, I think Vidya, you might have more experience.
Yeah, so as you rightly said, monitoring is very important, because first the capital requirement and how what is the source of funding is all can be worked out, and you have investors, and you also need to have a watch out on the government incentive schemes that are there, government schemes that are relevant to this, and see what is applicable and make use of all the schemes, not only applicable to the MSME itself but also to the customers. For example, if you are working for a OEM, so the OEM may have specific targets to comply with, and unless you kind of build up your strength and be able to support the OEMs, then you are out of business also. And you can also approach the OEM to take support from them for funding or for some kind of business model which will allow you to ramp up at the required speed and the effort that is required. So those different business models also can be worked out to see that you want to fulfill, you have willingness to do these things, and then how do you partner with different agencies to make it happen. So that is what you need to do. And as a larger corporate, what I've seen is all these finance people are working very close with the at the plant itself, with the engineers and with the plant management, and therefore you will have better visibility of the utilization of all these resources in the right way, and therefore it is properly monitored and the desired results are obtained.
Thank you. It has been seen in the European Union and several other developed countries that in spite of the consciousness about ecology and environment, many of these circularity practices don't have a payback, and therefore they are not viable per se. And therefore governments come in with models such as carbon tax, tipping fees, and so on. In India, our whole economic structure is perhaps different because a lot of work starts at the ground level where perhaps our labor cost is low, and that helps us in making this more affordable. But having said that, even going beyond the role of individual CMAs, if we take the role of the institute, how should the institute act as an interface between MSME and the government to do advocacy on behalf of the MSMEs to make some of these processes and technologies viable when they are inherently not viable by way of incentives?
Yeah, see, I also think that the institute also can play a very vital role as MSME, as a small company or a medium sized company. We may not have individually, if you're going to act, it could be very difficult. So the institute can actually have collective MSMEs working together on different areas, different industries, and then represent to the government to see how you can bring up the MSME, what kind of funding you can give, and what kind of models they can have with their with their larger customers, and then build a very inclusive approach. If you see even the ESG regulatory framework, it says it asks these larger corporates as to how much of MSMEs they are working with. So they want to have a very inclusive culture, and how are we supporting the MSME? So they are all ratings for the corporate itself, saying how are we supporting MSMEs to gear up and then help them in the entire process of making this happen. So they are pushing from there, and we need to make use of all those opportunities also, talking to the larger corporates.
If I may just
You have been
supplement,
very active in the institute, so what are your thoughts?
yeah, I think the institute has what I call a triple A role. First is analyze. I think institute has access through its members to industries, MSMEs to a large extent, to be able to, first is, sorry, I'm sorry, first is aggregate. aggregate all the data together, find out what the needs are, find out the gaps, and using, and many of the people here who are members and who passed exam long ago would remember that we study something called social cost benefit analysis in one of the subjects in the institute. I think putting that into saying that what's the payoff in the long run for society and for economy. So that's the second part, analyze. So aggregate the information, analyze, and with both these two, advocate. Go to government with very specific, I think this ability to aggregate and analyze can lead us to give very specific recommendations to say that these are the areas where you need a public money to come in to support to make this whole thing circular, because businesses themselves, their capital cannot make that happen.
You mentioned data, you mentioned aggregation and analysis. Now, in that context, while large-scale companies have access to ERP and they have access to artificial intelligence, data analytics, and so on, when it comes to MSMEs, there's a huge gap in terms of data infrastructure, analytical tools. So this is where perhaps CMAs could play a very significant role. How do you think that data transition could take place?
Uh, again, and that again, there are multiple ways one can look at it. First is saying that how do you find, and I think this is one more area where the institute and the CMAs have to upgrade themselves. While emerging technologies are mostly expensive, there's a very vast movement globally on open sourcing all technologies. And open source technologies are a fraction of a cost. We've even seen the latest AI, what it costs for a token on a ChatGPT 4 versus what it costs for a token on an open source platform is a thousandth of a fraction. So there are frugal tools available. So one is, as an institute, and then can we do understand and make that available and knowledgeable to think. At the second level, I think there's an opportunity for institute and at least some professionals to provide shared services on technology platform, which can make it affordable to the company, but at an aggregate level, it can still pay for itself. I think those are stuff that we can definitely think of doing.
Yeah, one more thing from the institute, what we could also do is partner with all these technology companies and then say that if this person is a CMA member, then he should be given this kind of concessional rating, that will really help and then be very useful for many members who wants to be part of it. And what we do as a corporate, since we need to take data of the MSMEs who are supporting us in their products or contract manufacturing as a ESG practice, what we need to do is we also need to take the data of all these MSMEs, do an audit of them, and then also say where are they in terms of fulfilling the regulatory requirements. So that data collection needs to happen, and every corporate is almost like starting to work towards it. It is not only having the data of its own entity, but also the data of the MSME support people who work with the corporates. So therefore, the data gets collected and it also needs to get audited, because assurance also needs to be done for the value chain partners. So when the regulatory is going very fast in their approach, now the MSMEs also needs to do a lot of gearing up, and then the institute can of course tie up with all these important technology companies or other companies which will help the MSMEs to get the pricing at a better competitive rates.
There are quite a few listed companies which have already started training programs for their MSME chain partners. Would you like to give some examples of what kind of training is being given to the MSMEs and how successful they are?
Yeah, so there are two things. One is on the ESG front and others also on the domestic value addition. So there also what we see is Make in India scheme is one of an important scheme. So there also they say these, if you see the larger corporates like Tata Motors and all of them, they have this PLI scheme, the production linked incentive scheme. So to qualify for that, they need to have a certain percentage of domestic content in their final product. So therefore, what they do is they go back to their value chain vendors and then say that how much is the value addition or what is the domestic content in your product. So that way, that also has started off. So similarly, the CSG also will start. So what we do is we we have all these MSMEs working for us. We have some kind of programs for them. We educate them what is our requirement and how are we supposed to do the reporting. And then say that we will have some CAs or CMAs to come and audit your what is your measurement criteria in meeting all these compliances, and then how you should ramp up in order to continue working with us. So that is what we have started, this education of MSME vendors working for the corporates.
When GST was introduced, there was this fear that especially small and medium enterprises would find it very difficult to move over from the earlier way of accounting to the new, more sophisticated, interconnected form. It did take 1 or 2 years of painful transition, but the transition has taken place. How long and how easy would the transition be when it comes to ESG reporting for MSMEs for the environmental information?
See, when GST came, of course, there were a lot of thoughts around saying everything is now getting tracked, and then you need to have an ERP system or whatever, some proper accounting system which will track your input tax credit and then your utilization against the credit and all that. But then we had no choice. We had to follow GST because here the government was much faster than the corporates themselves. So they had a very digitalized platform where they know what is the revenue of each company, and that's how it happened. And if you once if anybody thought that GST is very difficult to comply, then you're actually out of business basically. So that is how the entire trend went, and it became very fast adoption. So similarly, ESG also I think will fall in similar lines. Since the corporates are mandated to have their own MSME vendors to support them with certain ESG requirements. So even if they are not able to gear up, probably if the corporates need those MSME vendors, they may have to find some funding strategy to gear them up, or if the MSME vendors should do it on their own with either partnership or getting some green funds so that they are still in business and they don't lose out the business. So it's also a business risk if we are not really thinking about circular economy and then this ESG compliances. We just can't postpone it for a very long time. We have to see how we will be able to cater to it, and so that we are competitive and we become relevant.
Yes, thank you. Then you are associated with many portfolio companies, and there is a perception that MSMEs, when it comes to environmental issues such as wastewater treatment, air emissions, and so on, they might be taking the shortcut, or they may not go out fully in investing. They are less subject to regulatory scrutiny and so on. So, do you think along the value chain or along the relationship of partners, the large-scale companies should have some kind of an audit process for MSMEs when it comes to environmental compliance? And is there something with some circularity matrix? Is there a role that CMS can play in that regard?
Totally. In fact, I think I would say that it has to happen at two levels. One is the larger companies for whom these MSMEs are part of the supply chain, and therefore they have to put in do those audits. And I think CMAs can have a huge role in actually doing those audits and reporting on the relevant metrics back to that, because these metrics have to integrate back, like Vidya said, into the metrics of the larger organization to do that. But equally, and since we talked of our portfolio companies, many of them, equally the CMAs have a role in sort of helping the board do the same thing. Because one is to get it done by a customer, which is obviously very effective. The other is like many other governance issues. If this is something that the board mandates and the board says that I want this to be done independently, I think CMAs have a huge role in going by the board mandate, like the way it has happened in CSR, where the board mandates and people have sort of output it. I think the same can happen on circular economy, and the CMAs can actually help board both decide on the projects and audit the implementation.
Yeah, if you see the as a board priority, ESG has become a board priority now.
Yes.
So the board also wants to have reports on what are we doing, because that has become like a sustenance factor now. even if you have to have your business sustainability, this is one of an important criteria.
I mentioned the morning during my speech that in Europe and to an extent in the US, people are willing to pay a certain premium, a nominal premium for green products vis-a-vis the products which are not perceived to be green. In India, we are yet to reach that stage and it might take some time. But there are many MSMEs who are trying to place green products in the market with a green label and which have the circularity model built in, but they obviously don't get any premium or a market entry or market benefit. In this overall context, can the institute play a role in educating the government in terms of prioritizing for purchase green products, or levying some kind of a concessional tax, or in whichever way to encourage customers financially to go in for green purchases and thus help MSMEs?
So first, I just want to think. In fact, I didn't have time. I didn't mention it. We have done an analysis of portfolio investments in India, of investments which have unicorn, or what they call soonicorns, which will soon become unicorn kind of a stuff. The value increase metric for companies with ESG compliance in the last 7 years is 17% versus 10% for the average industry. So there is a recognition, if not at the buyer level, in the valuation metric, there seems to be a recognition saying that these sustainable companies are more long-term value creators. But I agree with you that I don't think it has translated yet. I think there are two challenges in that. The first is the fact that there is no incentive in any purchasing ecosystem to buy things which are more this compliant. And there definitely we should have a role in sort of advocating and encouraging. But equally, secondly, in certifying, one of the challenges today has been this whole thing of greenwashing, where a lot of things are there's a lot of mis-selling happening in the name of green, happening much more at a consumer level, but also at a B2B level thing. So somewhere again there, an assurance role that the institute and the CMA can be something that should be thought of.
Would you like to add?
This is with respect.
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah. So that is what.
About encouraging green products than their usage.
So yeah, encouraging green products. That's what I'm saying. So the awareness should actually increase. So from the institute side, from the government side, and even from the corporates, awareness should increase, and all the entities should actually work together, and then make it like a target to achieve for the economy as a whole.
And if I may add, I may go back to what I said. I think CMAs must become better storytellers. Because people remember stories, they don't remember numbers. By saying that green is doing this, metric-wise it won't happen. But if you tell a story that, like Fool doesn't talk of 22,000 on Ganga, because that's a metric. They say we provide employment to 300 women and 19 families have sent the girls back to the school. That is an emotive story. We have to learn to do the storytelling better, and I think that's again, we should be doing that a lot more to make it green sustainable.
Yeah, that's what I can add to it, because as CFO, storytelling is very vital, because that's how you convince your investors. The numbers are already there, but then what goes beyond the numbers is more important than what is there only with the numbers. So that what is the advantage of becoming an ESG compliant company is what we need to sell, rather than saying its cost, the cost can go up and then we need investments. They are all there, but how do we kind of handle all those issues and then come up to a stage where we are able to benefit and see a long-term success, both in terms of social, environment benefits, is what we need to start thinking about long-term success, and then see how we need to gear up to that.
Thank you. We have a standard template for the cost audit report, which has been in vogue for quite a few years. Now that there is this focus on green products and green technologies and circular economy, do you think that template also needs to be modified to reflect a company's contribution to circular economy?
Yeah.
And how should that be done?
No, that will really help, because if you see the ESG rating metrics itself, the assurance metrics, it gives a very clear picture as to what needs to be measured and what is the requirement and where are you. So it gives a measurement, financial measurement is there. So therefore, that itself can be used for assessing the company's fulfillment of these criteria. And it can be part of a report so that it tells you, it reminds you, that this is what you're supposed to do, and it becomes a more like a regulatory push also. Even though it is not mandatory, but still CSR is also not mandatory. But nevertheless, people want to contribute because nobody wants to say a reason for not investing in CSR activities. So therefore, it became like a board mandate, and board had to say that we have spent so much of amount this year for CSR, and therefore it becomes more important for the board members. You take it at that level, and then you say this is the ESG metrics that you have for your company, and we also have ratings for ESG. When there are specific agencies who come and do the rating, so all these things will psychologically put you into a place where you want to adopt ESG faster, and also make your MSME partners also come with you along the.
And then it will get escalated to the board automatically and also to the investor community.
Correct.
At this stage, I would like to invite questions from the floor for the two panelists. Any questions? There is a mic available. Or any comment related to MSME and the role of CMAs? Can you take the mic, please, and introduce yourself?
Hello. So this question is to Lakshminarayana. I am R. Purushothaman from Mysore chapter. He is my good friend only, friend since almost more than 20 years. One question, sir. You told the storytelling by CMAs will give a better communication for the clients. But we, the CMAs, I think poor in communicating our presentation and how to go about it, the storytelling, and is there any workshop you will prepare for the CMAs? Number one. Number two, our headquarters having one MSME cell itself. For that, our Central Council member Suresh Gunjali is the secretary, and they are complying all the MSME data, and they are supporting the government. I think you will take something from this discussion to put up for the MSME to the government. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. First is also a comment, and as is from Mysore chapter, you can start organizing programs, starting with students and then for members to do that. Sir, I am a member of the institute, sir. Like any, I am always available for the institute.
Yes, definitely I'll call you, sir.
Any other questions, comments?
So circular economy is not a new thing in India, but the environmental cost was the factor where most of the MSMEs didn't opt for this circular economy, like reconditioning and other things, because a lot of controls from the pollution control boards and other places. Now, how do we, as a collective thing for the MSMEs, how do they come out of this? So, for example, they had to install a lot of pollution control equipment and other things, which is not possible. But one thing I can say in Tirupur, when the dyeing industries was all there, they made collectively some pool of industries, and they could do the treatment of the waste in Tirupur at least. But in other industries, how they can go ahead with this? Especially the pollution control norms, to meet the pollution control norms.
I can speak about the chemical industry, and there is the concept of clusters has come up and become very popular. And even, for instance, in the state of Andhra Pradesh, there is a pharmaceutical cluster, or there is even talk of a circular economic cluster being set up. In foreign countries, whether it's Singapore, whether it's Netherlands, whether it's USA, there are chemical parks. And the way the system works is if there is a value chain involving, say, half a dozen companies, each giving for which the raw material of one is the product of the other, and they are in a value chain. they typically are connected by pipes. So you avoid all the transportation related carbon emissions. You reduce working capital because you don't have to have inventories. You don't have material moving over 1,000 kilometers from one end of India to the other. They are all next to each other. They have a common effluent treatment plant designed on the basis of the pre-collected data on the effluents discharged by each of the different types. They have a common utility system where steam and power are co-generated. They have a common firefighting system. They have a station and so on. And this has been known to bring down the capital cost by about 20 to 30% and the operating cost by about 20%. This is what has made the Chinese, the Singaporean, the Korean, the Thai, the American and the European chemical companies far more competitive. It has taken much longer in India to do this, and we have had some what we call chemical estates, but they are really nothing more than just an agglomeration of small and medium enterprises with no sharing of facilities whatsoever. Now the thinking in the government has changed, and they have realized the value of common facilities. So yes, I think it will help MSME substantially if we have these kinds of common facilities. Because the business of a company is not to make, not to generate utilities, not to treat wastewater. The business is the core business of making the product. And if someone else can take over the peripheral work, then it will help everybody concerned. Would you like to add?
So one more thing is, the clue what we take from the panelists is, institute should act collectively. Yes, institute is conducting the capacity building on the ESG, MSME developments and other things. But collectively, when we worked on the GST, we formed a task force. It's a free supply, give the inputs to all the users. But how the institute can do it in that way? Suresh Gunjali, is our Center Council member, is also here. Because it cannot be, it should be a voluntary support, and then only the awareness of the institute comes in the ESG field and other fields. How it can be done? Can you just highlight it, sir?
So I'm only saying that the institute can become, I think to Rajeev sir's point, institute can become the one that advocates, saying that these are the opportunities to the government. So see, forming collectives, for example, this is a geographic collective. Geographic collective is significantly driven by government planning and government incentive. That's where the institute can do that part of the role. The other part of the role is what Vidya had mentioned in her actually opening remarks, which is the whole thing about awareness.
Yes.
One is how can we make the members aware that this is very important thing to do, it will become inevitable, and therefore start planning for these and then build capacities. So like you're right, it will be voluntary, there has to be a pull, but that can come only from awareness. So my submission would be the first stage that the institute does is awareness, second stage is build capacity, in parallel do advocacy. That's how I see the role of the institute as an institute. Members are different. Members are working in this organization. They can do far deeper things within the organization. Was there a question somewhere in the back? Somebody in the back as well. So we'll take that as a last. Backbenches normally get missed otherwise.
See, one part is the MSME has to adhere to these things so that they exist in business. That's what I should say. Because if you ignore it, if you see this is it's costlier, the investments are there, and therefore it's very difficult for me to do, then your existence in business itself will become a question mark after a certain period of time. So it is a must to have rather than good to have. So we are going in that direction, and everybody will be forcing us to have all these things in place if you want to work for larger corporates. That is, and also if you want to, not only larger corporates, if you are trying to take private investments, or if you want to go public after some point in time. So these are all very important things to have. The other part is what I meant for institute to also guide and help people is to give this awareness of what's going on and how CMAs can help the MSMEs or can help the industries to bridge the gap between what needs to be done and where are we and what we need to be done. And even the banks can also actually work for MSME clusters. For example, you talk chemical industry. So your issues would almost be similar. So the banks can say, I will fund all these MSMEs at this concessional loan, and for that even the corporates can actually help on this. They can say, these are my MSMEs and we want them funding from the bank at a concessional rate so that they are able to take the loans and then be compliant. So there are different ways of working on this and then see that we are growing the business using this as an opportunity and not be scared about what the regulations are coming.
When it comes to advocacy, I would say that the advocacy is needed not merely at the national level or the state level, but even at the municipal corporation level, because a lot of solid waste management is done at the municipal corporation level in tier 3, tier 4 cities. And in some cases, the municipal corporations themselves are not aware of the cost structure. I'll give you the example of one particular city which came out with a tender document for treatment of construction and demolition waste. Now that's a huge challenge, and they came out with a tender, and there were companies which filled in the tender, and the lowest one got the contract. They had to almost fill in what the tipping fee should be to make the whole process viable. Now, if one were to analyze the cost structure, one would have known that that tender would never be operable. It was not viable. But the companies just would go ahead, get the tender, and then there would be many unethical practices that would be resorted to make an unviable proposition viable from their point of view. Now, if there were to be a CMA or a CMA auditor or a CMA auditor designated by the institute who had to be involved right at the tendering stage and in evaluating the tender, I think the model would work far more transparently and far more efficiently than the way it works. So I would suggest that advocacy is needed even at the local level.
Myself, Vishwanath Bhatt. As per my observation, for MSME, survival is a big challenge. If you advise anything, if it is an additional cost, they will not go for it. But the thing is, whenever they are getting the order, if it is mandatory, definitely they will go for it. And government give any concession, definitely they will implement it. That is why whatever implementation has to happen from either from government or from bigger corporate to all these vendors. As an institute, we have to train our members as well as all our employees to guide these people. Awareness, definitely, no doubt, we have to create a awareness in industry as well as members. But the thing is, all implementation either to incentive, like local content certificate. If you give a local content certificate, they will get the order. PLI, production link incentives. Based on certain percentage, if you are having automatically, they are getting the incentive. Because of that, they will comply. That is why either through incentive or mandatory, we have to make it all these things. But as an institute, training to members and corporate, it is definitely our duty, we have to do it.
Considering the time constraint, we will entertain another 2 questions.
Sorry, there was someone in the back. Excuse me. Raghav, there's somebody in the back. Someone here in the back has been trying for a long time to get your attention.
Hello, I'm Sundaravardhan. I just wanted to ask one question. This is a relationship between a big corporates versus the MSMEs, right? And I think you guys have rightly pointed out about the green product getting a premium. So from that angle and the perspective in current situation, is the corporates willing to pay a higher amount for a product from the MSME? Otherwise, it becomes not only for the green product, even the ESG compliance become a costly affair for the MSME. From that situation, how much is the push, or even I would say the favor or whatever the decision that big corporates can do towards the MSE, is that happening, or is it something still difficult? Because storytelling by the CMAs either in MSME side or in the big corporate side is a must. But beyond that, even the big corporates are under cost pressure. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
So for this, if you see from the corporate side, since their reporting should include MSMEs, ESG compliance. So they are somehow getting regulated that they need to work with MSMEs who are compliant, and they just can't change MSMEs because all MSMEs will be in the same boat, isn't it? Not that one MSME is so compliant and somebody is not compliant. If it is affordable, doable, then everybody wants to do that because they want to secure more business and go forward. So that way, the corporates will somewhere have indirect push to support the MSMEs to come to a level of compliance with ESG. So what MSMEs need to do is you need to have a conversation with the corporates saying that we want to do this, but support us with some banking facility. Maybe directly they may not be able to give, but with the corporate name, the bankers may lend to the MSME at a concessional rate. That's what I said. And then be a partner to them. Tell the corporates that you are doing this for their requirement also, and maybe you can ask for a higher, increase your prices and all that, and then make your profits there.
Yes.
But you must have a conversation with the corporates to say that this is my plan and this is how the corporate will be able to help you in this journey of transition.
I would add a couple of points. One is, as is very well known, MSMEs have to be paid within 45 days. And therefore, indirectly, they enjoy a better credit than some of the large-scale vendors. But in addition to that, especially in the rubber and plastic sector, and this may get extended to other industries as well, like building construction, the extended producer responsibility has almost come in. Uh, it's being enforced partially and by next year. So a large scale company such as a brand owner will need to increasingly have 20, 30, 40, 50% of recycled material. And this recycled material can only come typically from the MSMEs. In addition, if they don't get the recycled material to the extent needed, they have to buy credits, EPR credits, and those credits indirectly mean funding or paying a premium to the MSMEs. So I think the government's model of EPR is indirectly making the large scale enterprises and brand owners to subsidize the MSMEs to become more circular as a value chain. Would you agree?
Because the larger corporates also has to report what is the percentage of MSME working with them.
Yes.
So therefore, indirectly, there is a push from the government.
Yes. We can take just one more question.
Yeah, that's my last question. I'm so sorry. Yeah, this is Ramya Sindhu. Yes, I'm working for a corporate company. And thanks firstly for the much more insight on this, CMS role in MSMEs. I just would like to add a doubt, like, with the advent of this, Gen AI, Chat GPT, Gen 4, everything. So will the CMAs, institute, if they aid the members in getting, trained in such, CMS role with the help of AI, Gen AI, everything to the MSMEs. So will that definitely add any value to the services, or how would you define?
Yeah, I guess the answer is absolute yes. I think this is technology evolution is an inevitability, and I think we have to equip our members. Again, we don't have time for stories, but there's the way AI is, doing even things which eyes do today in terms of for circular economy, and there are a lot of examples of. I know a startup here which takes. Large stores take potatoes and tomatoes which are only in nice looking shape, but in nature they grow with different shapes. They are called ugly products in the farm industry. Earlier it was segregated manually. Today it just segregates and reduces the cost. Otherwise, what was thrown is now a new industry of taking ugly products and selling it to the hotels. I'm just saying how CMAs start understanding the use of AI, not only in their role, which is obviously what I think institutes will anyway do, but in their businesses is absolutely very important. And that's true for all technology. I think when I started my career, it was about there was this new product called Excel, which we had to learn. And then today everybody knows Excel. Similarly, an institute did that at that time. I think that's something that I'm just saying we all have to learn to adopt and embrace technology as it comes and learn to use it. Of course, there are challenges. One is not saying there are other things which we'll not go into right now, lack of time. But to your simple question, the simple answer is yes, we should.
10 things like quantifying the process, benchmarking, everything, that also can be done by,
A lot.
the tools.
AI can do
Yeah.
a lot more than what we are
Yes.
using at this point in time. And
Yes.
as it evolves, and with this whole thing with IoT, if you integrated that to AI,
Yes.
there's a lot more that technology can deliver for better things. Of course, you have used, I'm sure, as a director, and your industry has used a lot again. So
Yes.
we want to supplement.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, here again, I think there'll be so much of data coming in as we transition from one to the other. And data analytics, AI will play a very important role, not just in reporting, but in becoming more efficient. It's clearly known in each of the industries that have been studied that with the proper use of AI, ML, with proper data analytics, one can increase profitability in each of the business departments, whether it's supply chain, whether it's manufacturing, whether it is maintenance, or whether it's marketing. So, but there is great potential for efficiency improvement, which eventually will make our country more competitive. So, any further comments?
No, I think.
So with that, we come to the end of this panel discussion. We have had very interesting and useful discussion. The key takeaways are that MSMEs are a very important segment of the national economy. They will also need to be incentivized and made conscious about the shift from linear economy to circular economy. In this, the large-scale industries, the listed entities will have a very significant role to play in not only hand-holding them, but treating them as partners along the value chain, giving them inputs such as funding, training, data management systems, and so on. And with this, the transitioning would be much easier. We also discussed that even the institute has a substantial role to play in educating the government and in taking up advocacy to make sure that the MSMEs move from one model to the other and do the transition in a way that is feasible economically, financially, socially, and environmentally. So with that, I thank both the panelists for the very useful contribution they have made, and I thank the audience for the keen interest they have taken. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It is my